Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Luke O'Donovan. I'm the Festival Director for Zoomed In, and thank you once more for joining us again. So today, we have a fantastic programme. We're joined by some architectural photography royalty and also an exciting young music and multidisciplinary, a very creative young artist as well. And we're all kind of a mishmash of people that have come together, all worked with Walmer Yard. So that brings me quite nicely onto our curator today, Laura. So Laura, when I emailed you about 2 weeks ago, I think we had seen each other around a little bit before, we knew each other's faces but we didn't know each other. What did you think when you got the email saying, would you like to create this festival day in like 2 weeks?
I thought, that's quite soon. But I thought it sounded really interesting. And I think during this time, I think everyone's a bit more open to kind of doing things quickly or kind of having a go and seeing what we can work out. And for me, I'm kind of used to running a public program at Walmer Yard, but obviously all of that kind of has had to stop in terms of like physical, real events. So it was a good chance to do something that kind of picked up on our program here.
Yeah. So Laura, tell us where you're coming from this afternoon.
So my job is the keeper of Walmer Yard. So I look after a set of 4 houses in West London that were designed by Peter Salter. And I run the Baylight Foundation here, which is a charity which explores how we experience architecture through kind of using these houses as a means to do that.
Mm-hmm. And that fits quite nicely into your sort of theme for the day. So the previous 2 days, that's all archived on zoomedinfestival.com and on our YouTube channel. We had a brilliant range of photographers, and we had a very strong photography focus. But you're our first curator who's not a photographer. I mean, it's a part of your kind of career and your life, but it's not something that you do as a professional. So tell us a bit more about that theme that you've introduced today.
Yeah, so I wanted to draw on the kind of themes that we look at Walmer Yard of how we experience architecture, but thinking about it in terms of today when we can't now visit buildings. So photography is a really good way of kind of looking at buildings that we can't actually be in or physically visit. So I wanted to use that as a means of exploring kind of how we look at the experience and the sensual qualities of architecture and whether we can really capture those in different means. So today's first talk will look at kind of capturing the experience of Walmer Yard through different photographers and different means. But then we have another talk at 7 p.m. this evening, which is exploring kind of what it means to experience a building when you can't visit it through both photography, but also through experiential events or through visualizations, or even VR. So kind of this broader way of looking at architecture.
Mm-hmm. And then between the 2 talks, we have a video screening as well with Mil Raphael showing a couple of his films that he's made about, very experiential kind of viewpoint on architecture. So that's what we've got on throughout the day. I'm now going to hand over to Laura, who's going to introduce our guests. If you're tuning on YouTube, please do leave questions and comments, and I'll be feeding them to Laura throughout. And hope you enjoy.
Thanks, Luke. Our first event, we're going to be looking at Walmer Yard and how it's been portrayed in film and photography and how that reveals the sensual qualities of the space. So before I introduce our kind of 3 speakers, I'm going to just start by showing 3 short films. So the first film was shot by Jim Stephenson, who I'm sure will tell us more about this later. But this explores the light at Walmer Yard, and kind of it was shot over, I think, a day, maybe 2 days, and it's really interesting look. So I'll just share my screen and share that now. And now the second film I'm going to show was made during the build and construction process of Walmer Yard. So you'll see the staircase isn't quite finished. And it was probably one of the first films to be shot there by a photographer called Andrew Corrigan. And it just begins to chart the movement of the light through a single staircase in house 1. There's no sound to this, so when you see it, don't be a bit confused that there's no sound going on. I'll just share this now. Great. And now this final video, which I'm going to share, is the music video for the single Nowhere Like It by H. Bernard. And this was part of kind of a really interesting series of videos which H produced, which also saw him film the Futuro house, which he found one kind of in a campsite in Wales, which I was really interested by. But Harrison's actually here, so he's going to talk a little bit about these films, I think, in the discussion, but I'll just show this one now.
Just trying to find it. Sometimes you frighten me. Where are your city dreams? Why don't you speak to me? Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Like it. 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 Come on. Like it. Like it. Like it. I know. Like it. Just trying to find it. Like it. Come
Right. So now I'm going to introduce our speakers who have all shot at Walmer Yard in quite different circumstances. And they're going to talk a little bit about their work and their experience of shooting here. And then we'll open it up for questions. So if you've got any questions, please do put them in the comment box. So first up, we've got Harrison Bernard, or H. Bernard, who's going to talk a little bit about the music video, which you just saw. So Harrison is a self-taught recording artist, musician and producer whose music has been described as kind of genreless. But H also directs all his own visuals, and he's going to talk a bit about the music video. So Harrison, do you want to share your screen?
Cool. Thanks, Laura. Firstly, thanks for putting me up for this. Never done anything like this before, so it's interesting. Let me share my screen. Desktop, share. So, see that all right? Let's do this full screen. Where is it? I'll just do it like this. So yeah, basically, yeah, as Laura said, I'm a musician and producer, artist. And really and truly what happened was we were creating a project, so me and my friends who make music with me, and some people were describing the music as quite alien and quite space-like, just because it kind of felt in a pocket where it wasn't really one thing or the other. It wasn't really techno, it wasn't really grime, it wasn't really soul, so it felt otherworldly. So when we were planning the visual aspects, we wanted to kind of find spaces that felt otherworldly, like places that people don't visit often, kind of thing. And we looked around at a few spaces and we were thinking about decorating places that had already been built. But when we discovered Walmer Yard, we just realized it would be perfect. And Laura invited me around like a day after I contacted her. And I had a look around and straight away we were like, yeah, this place has got the feel of the song perfect. It's kind of timeless. It's kind of, we were looking for something that felt futuristic, but not in the most like typical sci-fi sense. And I feel like Walmer Yard really captured that. So these are some of the pictures that we took whilst we were doing the video. This one on the screen now is actually what we chose to be the single artwork. So normally it would be in a square. We were inspired by furniture designer Kossar Khan. So Walmer Yard didn't have the blow up sofas when we went in there, but Laura said it would be quite a good fit. So that was kind of a theme we went with. What we got next? Yep, so yeah, the Kossar Khan reference there again. And the story of this was to do with isolation. So the song was to do with, you know, kind of wanting to explore life and leave our current situation, which is kind of funny because it feels kind of like this isolation situation we're in right now, being confined to one space and wanting to explore further. And the story was a kind of me being the bad guy, and I'm in a relationship with this person who wants to explore more, and I'm holding her back. That was kind of the story. So it's kind of depicted through, she's always in the same outfit. I'm always changing and switching and popping up on her. And each moment she tries to find some time alone and plan to leave, I always get in the way, when in the end she has to get rid of me. That's why she pulls the gun on me. Quite a dark story, but I think it came across not too scary. So in the room upstairs, Laura let us lay out all these pieces of paper, me and the set designer. And this was kind of like, if you look closely, it's kind of like her plans to leave. There's her killing me. And then I pop in and actually catch her looking at the plans, looking very, very angry. Yeah, and then I guess some of these photographs we got as well were kind of, they weren't particularly off the concept. There was kind of like, because the space is so interesting and there's so many curves and so many colors, we kind of just took a lot of random outtakes. So these are kind of like relates directly back to the actual film, while stuff like this we just did on the day, random, and it came out really well to use as press material, and we turned these into posters and stuff as well. Some shots of the final scene. And it's funny, this final scene wasn't even planned. So this was quite a rush shoot, in all honesty. And me and the DOP didn't actually have we didn't have a place for the final scene. And we were just exploring on the day. And as soon as we saw this light shining, we thought this would be a perfect end scene for where she gets rid of me. And it became quite an iconic shot that we used across the whole release. Yeah, and it kind of, as you can see with this space, it's just all these curves, all these shapes, all this iconography that comes through. And this is some kind of behind the scenes stuff we got, where you can kind of see the actual space a little bit more. We just try to utilize everything interesting in the space, like the sliding doors and her locking me out, just kind of using it as like I don't know, I can't think of the word. Using it kind of like, just using parts of the building as references to the mood and you know, symbolism. But yeah, that's kind of it. Let me log back on here. How do I stop sharing my screen? There we go.
Press the button at the top, that's it. Great, thanks, Harrison. I think for me it was really interesting because we have quite a few shoots at Walmer Yard, but yours in particular really used like the building, and the thought of how the building was portrayed was really like part of it. Before we move on to the next speaker, I'm just going to ask you a few questions that have come in directly related to your work. So Alana Braden asked, she said she really loves the video and how you move through the space. But she asked kind of, did you have a favorite room as you were doing it?
Favorite room? Ooh. You know what, it might be actually the end scene I was just talking about. I think just because it was kind of the one we didn't plan, it turned out to be the most important shot. And yeah, it was just completely unplanned, and I think it came out the most like visually appealing shot. But in terms, yeah, that in terms of the actual shoot, that one, but in terms of rooms in general, I quite like the kitchen. We had a lot of fun in that kitchen. I think the lights shining down is really nice and went really well with the outfit we chose for the model and stuff like that. So kitchen, let's say the garage and the kitchen.
Yeah, I think the garage shot's just so beautiful. It's really, the light coming down is amazing. There's also a couple of questions from Sergio Lopez, and he is asking, how long did it take you to shoot, and how many days of planning and scouting do you do?
I think we shot it in one day. I think it was about, 10 hours? Laura was very nice and let us stay a few hours later to get those final key shots. Planning wise, maybe about a month of like storyboarding and getting the right characters together and getting the outfits together. But really it didn't take that long. It was a small crew. It was about 5 of us, so it wasn't like a big budget shoot or anything. But yeah, that month of planning really made it easy on the day. Yeah,
I felt like you were one of the most organized like groups I've had for a while.
That's a big compliment.
And then just one final question before we move on from Max Juni. He's asking, what time period is it set in? Is it the present or is it the future? Or maybe it's no time.
There's no time. There's no time. This is the thing. We kind of did this on purpose. Like, it's not really, it's supposed to feel like you don't know when it's set. Because I mean, the camera quality, it was shot on a Betacam, which was like a popular format for shooting in the early 2000s, late 90s. They used to shoot the news on it. So, you know, a lot of people tie it to that just because of the quality of the camera, but it's not really supposed to be set in any particular time. I think it's supposed to be a question unanswered. But yeah.
So we'll pick up some more of these questions at the end, but I just want to now introduce our next presenter, so Jim Stephenson. Jim's a photographer and a filmmaker whose work kind of mainly focuses on the built environment. He's made films of architecture projects by a vast number of architects, including Norman Foster, Zaha Hadid, Peter Zumthor, and his work has been shown at film festivals around the world. So I'd like to get Jim to speak about his photographs of Walmer Yard now.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks for inviting us along. It's a really great panel, and it's good to be here. And thanks to Luke for all the huge amount of work you've done over the last few days on Zoomed In. It's going really, really well. Right, I'm going to share my screen here. Hold on a second. All right, hopefully you've all got that up now. If you haven't, send me a message or something. Yeah, as Laura said, my name's Jim Stephenson and I'm an architectural photographer and filmmaker. My work tends to focus a lot more on people and life in architecture, kind of using architecture as the stage set for the information that goes on around it. Who's just 1 second, everyone. Oh, sorry, someone was sending me a message. Right, we're back in it. Yeah, my work tends to focus more on the architecture as a stage set. So I sort of lean more towards documentary architectural photography. Fundamentally, I'm an architectural photographer, but I lean more towards the documentary style. I studied architectural technology, and my background is in design. I worked for a number of different practices for quite a few years before leaving it and jumping over to architectural photography and then filmmaking after that as well. And when I'm on a shoot, or any shoot really, commissioned or editorial or any shoot, I'm never thinking of images on their own as without their context, without their brothers and sisters next to them. I'm thinking of images as a series. So no picture is in isolation. This is partly, I think most photographers think like this when they're working editorially or thinking editorially. But it's also partly because I'm a filmmaker, and it's very rare that you see a film where you just see one shot with no context of the shots around it that construct the narrative. So I'm always trying to construct a bit of a narrative with a series of photos, just as I would with a still, just as I did with the film that you saw earlier. On this shoot, which I'll talk about time shortly, we spent quite a bit of time on this shoot. We loosely based it around the idea of it being a kind of day in the life of the building. These aren't all the photographs I took, I should say. These are just a small selection that I put together for this presentation. My first impressions when I arrived at the building were of the atmosphere that you feel when you're there, not just what you can see and what you can subsequently take pictures of, but the atmosphere that you can feel, that the sound inside each of the rooms and the way the temperature changes from space to space, and the way everything feels. And obviously the light was really important as well. And it was also the sort of choreography that was involved in navigating the spaces. These aren't your typical kind of mass house building floor plans. These are really intricate, bespoke floor plans that are really involved an element of choreography to navigate. And it kind of reminded me of a Neil McLaughlin quote, which I'm going to paraphrase a bit here because it was a few years ago that I saw him do this in a lecture. But he suggested the idea that maybe architecture isn't about the walls and the floors and the roofs. Maybe it's more about everything that moves through those things, the time and the light and the people. And I think for me, the architecture that I enjoy the most is the architecture that expresses that sense the most. And I have rarely been to a building or a series of buildings that has expressed that as strongly as Walmer Yard has. Part of that is Walmer Yard itself and the design that went into it and the craft that went into building it. Part of that is also related to the amount of time that I had to photograph this, which was a real massive luxury. The chance, what time allows you is the ability to reflect on what you're looking at and engage with it in a bit more deeply and actually absorb some of the atmosphere. And this is something Laura and I have worked before on different projects. And we shot the Maxi in Rome by Zaha Hadid, for instance. And we work on this idea of slowing down when we take photographs and when we make films. And we do things like, we make sure we stop for a cup of tea and we take our shoes off so that we're just in our socks, which makes us walk a little bit slower and be a little bit more engaged. And all of this sounds incredibly, incredibly privileged. And of course it is. I'm a commercial photographer, and having that much time on a project is a privilege. But when I work with a client who recognizes the importance of that time and isn't trying to rush things through in half a day, I think the images reflect it really well. And the accumulation of this time spent on these pictures, I think, is present in the photographs as well. I stayed in the space, I slept in space, I ate in the space, I woke up there, I sat down and rested in the space. And all of these things, these activities that aren't related to actually physically taking a photograph, they all go to breaking down the mindset of it being a commission and having to collect a series of images. And that's really what I wanted to do with Walmer, with all my work ideally, but with Walmer especially, break down the idea that I'm not just there to collect a series of images that can be put on a website. And it allows you to contemplate the space a bit more and engage in the atmosphere, like I just said. The brief was to show the space being used to a degree. Nobody lives in the spaces, they're not homes to anybody yet. So I was reluctant to be too blunt with that, and to do too many photographs that, you know, showed somebody you know, sitting in an armchair reading a book, or some children playing in the courtyard. You do see figures, as you can see in this image here and in this image here, but really the figures are quite small in the frame, and we wanted to suggest human occupancy rather than really demonstrate it. Just a hint at it instead. So there's a lot of pictures of unmade beds and shoes left in a corner where we've taken our shoes off and things like that. And yeah, just hinting at a human presence rather than hammering it home too much. And then, of course, in the evening, we invited some friends round to have dinner in one of the houses. There's 4 houses at Walmer Yard. In one of the houses at Walmer. And to have dinner with us. This is Laura preparing dinner for everybody there. And Fenella Collingridge and Peter Salter were both there, who were the architects who worked on the project, amongst other people. So around this dinner table, which looks a bit kind of Renaissance-y, Last Supper-y painting in that image, around the dinner table, a discussion broke out about the spaces and about how they make you feel. And I still had 2 days left to photograph. So this discussion that we took these photographs for actually was really important in informing the rest of my work, the rest of the photographs I took, and even the film that we did, which doesn't actually have anybody in until the dinner scenes at the end. And it's really more about atmosphere. But all of these discussions and the importance of time was really important in the way that I photographed it. So that was my experience of Walmer. Let's stop the share. There we go.
Thanks, Jim. It's always nice to see those photos again, because I was so kind of intimately involved in kind of the shoot and being so we've had a couple of questions come in for you. I feel like these are slightly silly, but I'm gonna So Rob's been asking, have you managed to convince other clients to let you wander around in your socks?
They don't get a choice. Obviously, as long as it's socially appropriate, I always take my shoes off to walk, and I always have clean socks on without holes in. That's an important part of my kit bag, and a spare pair of socks, because it does help slow me down. I didn't do it when I shot London Bridge train station, obviously, but where it's appropriate, I do.
I think that was the thing that started when we shot the Walters and Cohen's Buddhist Centre together.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
And then you definitely felt the slow down pace.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Hélène, and then we can pick up some more of these questions as we discuss things later, because I've got some of myself for you. So Hélène, do you want to come in? And I'm just going to introduce you. So Hélène Binet is one of the world's leading architectural photographers. We're really privileged to have her here. But she's published numerous books and won prizes for her work and numerous exhibitions. And when Walmer Yard was first completed, Hélène was the only photographer allowed to shoot it. And her images of the project have probably become the most iconic architectural images of Walmer Yard. So Hélène's going to talk a little bit about that process of shooting.
Thank you, Laura. I'm very happy to be part of this talk, to share this experience. When you invited me in the beginning, I said, oh, great, I'm going to go back there. And then I realized, no, it's all going to be online. We don't do those things anymore to go. Why happy to go back? Because, yes, it's such a beautiful, complex building that you never think you know it all and you understand it all and you have seen what the light can do. Now I'm going to try to share the work I've done and talk with you about the process of photographing. I came here late 80s, and Peter Salter was one of the first architects I met around the Architects Association, and he just built his first pavilion in Japan. You can imagine then what is it to be invited, I don't want to count how many years later, 28, 30 years later, to photograph his masterpiece, Walmer Yard, and to have the task to bring somehow all the quality of this building into something bidimensional. And I was very, very happy and humbled to get this role. But it is a big dilemma, because it is not a piece of writing, a piece of theater, a piece of music, something that you can, as an author, I was thinking about Peter Salter, you can make sure that many people are going to experience. The building is the building, and only in the end, few people will experience the building. The photograph, it's a photograph. And we have to start with this as a really basic realization, to look at images and to look at the building. So there's always this enormous tension and preoccupation about the relationship, what a building can give you and how complex is this experience. We're talking about tactile, we're talking about even feeling the different temperature, like Jim was saying about being immersed in different colors of light. The light has color, the surfaces have color, but this doesn't matter. What is extraordinary in that place, the light has color. We can smell, we can remember, we know the work of Peter Salter, that we've seen the plan, too much, and what can we do with the camera? So my position always been to be very reductive when I want to say something instead of competing with this experience. But it is complex also to know what is a space and what do we do with our space. And Bachelard said that memory is anchored in space. So that's a very beautiful image, also because he used the word anchor. So it's like a little boat tried to run away, but you tied with an anchor not to run away, and it is in space. So playing with memories and space to release something poetic is very important. And I notice how in films and in the work of Jim, this juxtaposition of images is very strong, because there is this need to bring two images together and say, let's see what is the third thing that our imagination created when we put them together. And in this building, I think this is a very strong dimension, also because it's not a place where you will sit. It always an imaginary sitting. You always see something else. You always have an opening. You always have a different color light coming. You always have something that takes you somewhere else. So this tension about moving your spirit, about dreaming is extremely strong. Even if you think about the shutter that are protecting from the light, they are not related to one window, they are related to the whole facade. So when you see something, you're always connected from the inside to another floor, it's really a building which is in continuous movement to take your imagination, to take your spirit somewhere else. And in that case, I try to do it in an almost obsessive way. You know, we all remember as a child, we used to sit somewhere and stare at a piece of wall and think this is an universe. And I think this building has many, many places like this where you can just sit and look and see many, many other references that bring you somewhere else. So it was not an easy project to photograph, and that's why I say you will never know it completely, because the light is really, it's like a brush of paint that changed the building. Well, it's a dress, so it's something that changed the place, and especially this inner place. We're talking mostly about an inner place. The outside is not so relevant, and then the light comes and change and brings different aspects and modulate what you see or you don't see. So every season, every hour, every weather is telling you a new story. So yes, to be living there for a couple of months or even years must be something quite unique. I don't photograph so much people or object. I want you to go in. And somehow I always have a feeling if there is a person, you don't step into the photograph. And my wish is you to enter. But this is the way I approach the work of photographing space since I've been trying to do that. Maybe I always feel that why do I do this? Why I'm still photographing space? I think it's almost an impossible task. So it's something that you can carry on all your life, because there's something between photography and space that doesn't always get together. I'm known for my black and white photograph, as you maybe all know. But in that case, I had to very quickly realize that, yes, to give the materiality of the space, black and white could be good, but color, of course, it's the building, it's a color experience. So yeah, there's many things I could keep saying, but let's leave a bit of time for question. And to share maybe between us this wonderful experience of being there. So
thanks, Hélène. I think for me, I think your photos are beautiful, and it was one of my experiences when I first started in my job. We were putting together the kind of final book that showed all of Peter's drawings and all of your photographs, and it was a real chance to kind of look through all of them, because, you know, we're used to the ones that have been published in magazines, but actually you took hundreds and thousands of these beautiful photographs. It's really nice. I've just got one question that I wanted to ask you and pick up on. So your imagery doesn't really feature people, but I remember Fenella Collingridge, who worked on a project describing how you took photographs at Walmer Yard, and she said she experienced you sitting in a chair and then getting up, and you took the photo as you kind of walked away from the chair. So I wonder if, even though you don't take photographs of people in the space, they still have this feeling of a presence. And how do you think about that?
I mean, the presence, yes, buildings are made for people, so you always imagine people touching, people breathing, people sitting, people sleeping. So a chair is a very strong object. It will very much make you imagine somebody. I think there's a very, I like chairs, a very beautiful object, but also it has a lots of reference. Immediately you imagine somebody sitting there. So some of the furniture can be a way of thinking about the people. Now we're talking about a very new building, but in case of historical building, I think traces of changes due to the way you touch, the weathering, the light that have been changing the color. These are also form of presence that somehow can refer also to the human activity. Yes, it's you know, for me it's not the absolute rule that you see, oh, I will never photograph a person in a space. I'm not into this kind of position almost like the Düsseldorf school, where that's what you're going to do all your life. There could be a point where, you know, people, object, I think, can be quite, when I photograph Peter into studio, of course, to see what's around him in his office or studio, what sort of object and painting, and it tells a lot about the person. So it can be, you know, through an object also. Yeah,
great. And I've got a question here from Andrew Perkins, who says your images are stunning, but they're quite abstract. Is that about creating the feeling of the building?
The building is not abstract at all, so it's an overwhelming building with many layers. It's just about reducing the sense that at least I can communicate one very specific experience instead of try to bring everything, which I think it's an impossible task. So it's about just telling you one thing in one moment that maybe make you dreaming or remembering.
Yeah. And then one final question just before we bring everyone back and we have more of a round discussion. Luke Hayes has said, did you take the photographs in one single session, or was it over a longer period of time?
It was a long period of time in different season. Also, when the building was not really finished, and it was like, oh, you can't photograph this, oh, you can't photograph it, oh, don't look up, there's a hole, oh, don't look down. So, but over a long period of time, and season, that was always very important, because in the winter you have a low light. It was the most magical. Then in the spring or summer you have a light that reach some part of the building that it will be not reached during the winter. So we tried to orchestrate that will be done different. And it was always 4 or 5 days of shoot. And I don't remember how many times. I work slowly. I work on film, and I don't make hundreds of photographs a day, maximum 25 maybe in one day. So it's quite of a slow process.
Great, thanks. I'm going to welcome Jim and Harrison back now. So if you want to come back into the room, and then I've got a few questions for all of you, just to look at kind of how we experience architecture through your photographs and how we portray Walmer Yard. So my first one, I think, is more for Jim, but maybe you all want to chip in. So Jim, your series is quite different in that you capture kind of people in the space, and I commissioned those photographs, so I know that was the intention, was to have a set that was very different to Helene's, for a different purpose. Can you talk a little bit about how you managed to capture that sense of people being in the space, even in some aspects there aren't anyone there, you know, there's just kind of a pair of shoes?
Yeah, it's difficult, because it's always, because my work, like I said, tends to lean towards having people inhabiting space or using space. So that's fine when it's a gallery or a museum or a public space, a train station, piece of infrastructure. But when it's a house, it's trickier, I find, to have people inhabiting it without the photo a bit like a kind of I don't know, like a sort of Dwell magazine kind of real estate lifestyle thing, which is not what I want to get across. No offense to the people who do, but I don't want to do that with my images. I want it to be a different style. So when there's pictures of unmade beds and pictures of shoes and things like that, that's really just about hinting that there are humans there. You don't need to show somebody standing in the space saying, here I am in this space, to show that people occupy that space. You just need to show that there was some human habitation at some point. And then later on in the images, you do start to see people move in, because I wanted to, in a sort of musical score kind of way, kind of build the anticipation that something was happening in the evening and that people were coming together there as well. But during the day, you only really see these little glimpses of objects that are left lying around. I found it really interesting, excuse me, what Hélène was saying about wanting the viewer to come into the photo. And I do agree that having a person in there kind of stops you coming into it. I don't know where that leaves my work, because I really like having people in the image, but I also want people to come into the image. But I can see why the having a person in there would stop it. So there's some reevaluation going on during this discussion for me. But it's just showing little hints and getting that amount right. So we're not heavily styling it. You know, we're not bringing in like really expensive throws and draping them over bits of furniture. You know, it was really down to what was there. And then on the occasions where there are people in the photographs, they were invited round. They were mostly your friends and colleagues and collaborators. And it wasn't a case of saying, can you sit there and can you sit down there and can you do this? It was just, come in, welcome, come in. And then I just watch them move around and have conversations with each other and naturally go to the spaces that they want to be in. And then I would respond to that as a photographer, rather than, I'm not really comfortable directing people to that extent.
And Harrison, I'm interested in what made you pick Walmer Yard, because I know that what I found interesting when you came to Walmer Yard was that you had a kind of dialogue about architecture. It felt like you got architecture and you had that kind of interest in it. And so I'm interested in like how you found out about Walmer Yard, but also kind of what made you pick it for that film.
Tough one. I mean, it was, like I said, it was just perfect. It was just perfect. It was kind of just like something that clicked in my head as soon as I saw it. I could imagine the color palette. I think the color palette in the space is what was really important. That the turquoise and the reds and stuff like that, and the shapes. It just, at the time, I was just looking into a lot of kind of like 60s architecture and stuff from that kind of era. And I guess I was just, it felt like that in Walmer, but it also didn't feel super stereotypical. So, you know, I wasn't trying to make a film based on like big flares and 60s and 70s, like cheesy pop. But I do like some of those kind of stereotypes from it as well. And Walmer just felt like a tasteful kind of, like, I don't know if that was Peter's ever intention or whatever, but I felt that kind of thing from it. And then the sheer size of the space was just like, cool, we have a lot to play with, like in terms of scenes and stuff, and how we can really, just stretch the video out and make it really expansive and interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've got a question, which is, I think, for all of you. So you all shoot in quite different ways. So Hélène on film, Jim on a digital SLR, Harrison, you shot on a Betamax kind of style. And I wonder, does that have an effect on the atmosphere of the photographs that you capture or the films you capture in the end? Hélène, do you want to answer first?
Well, I think so. The tool you use has some quality and some type of result that will have an effect. Definitely. I mean, the process is slow. I still think that a transparency has a range of color, which is more than the digital. It's hard to get and all of that, but it's very, very rich. And the slowness, it's an important part of the method, because it's a little bit, for me, like giving a performance. You have few films, they're expensive, it's heavy, blah, blah, blah. You have to prepare, you get there. You're not going to make 100 of photographs. You have to make one. So you have to be extremely concentrated and extremely focused. And I think this is what I like, and that's what is important, that you are in a space, you are in a moment, the light is changing. Don't think that photographing a space is something meditative and slow. In a sense it is, but light goes so fast that you've got to react. You have to be concentrated. And so I think, the medium is definitely part of the result.
Yeah. And Harrison, do you want to add about your Betamax shooting?
I'll be honest with you. We wanted to shoot the actual movie on film, but it was just too expensive. So when me and the DOP were discussing like how can we still get something that has like a feeling from that era, he suggested the Betacam, and I watched a few examples of it, and I was like, yeah, this isn't film, but it still has like a texture and a feel that takes it a bit further than the digital. Although I think
I think we're losing you a little bit.
See music videos shot on, you don't really see music videos shot on, oh geez, internet is unstable. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we just lost you a little bit there.
You don't really see music videos shot on beta anymore. And I don't know, I just felt like we wanted to do something really, really different. So it made sense to use that format instead of digital or forking out a lot of money to do the film. That's it really.
Jim, do you want to add about your shoot?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely, the medium that you're working with absolutely changes the atmosphere in the images. I mean, I work with digital cameras. I work with a digital SLR that I do the stills and the video on. I would like to have a more filmic atmosphere in the images, but I also, the way up is that I quite like to be able to, although I work fairly slowly, I like to be able to react quickly if something is happening. So although in Walmer there was less reaction, if I'm photographing in a museum, like when, for instance, at the Maxi, photographing the outside of the Maxi, and then a kid wearing a Incredible Hulk outfit at a fancy dress party ran across the front of the building and started photobombing other people's photographs. And I wanted to be able to, in that instance, I wanted to be able to really quickly reposition my camera, get set up again and get that, rather than, I don't have enough experience working with a large format camera to be able to do that quickly. So digital camera is what I use. With the film though, the film was also all shot digitally, the video. There's a weird thing with that. I'm shooting 4K, it's very high quality. It's quite glossy when it comes out and it looks quite fake. It looks like a kind of infomercial advert feel. So I actually, the image, the incredibly expensive camera produces this very clean, crisp image. And then I go into post and add a very, very small amount, a tiny amount of grain to it to degrade the image because it looks too glossy. It does look like a kind of late night shopping channel kind of footage. So it's an odd mix of sort of taking very high end expensive equipment and then degrading the image at a tiny percent, but just to take the edge off it a little bit.
That photograph at the Maxi is probably one of my favorite photographs it was just that perfect moment of a little kid coming in his Hulk costume. So I'm going to take a few questions from the audience that are watching us on YouTube. So Sergio Lopez has asked, how has your interpretation of spaces changed over the years? And what do spaces at the beginning mean to you and what do they mean now? Hélène, do you want to go for that one first?
I think the concern are the same, but over the years you manage to get to the essence of building, let's say, more efficient or to lose less time, or maybe superficial aspects of a building that were not so relevant for you. So it's about realizing this relationship between what the building is giving and what are your interests, that they kind of match together. And maybe this is a process that comes and you have more courage to say,
I don't have an answer for that.
This is not what I want. This is not what it's relevant for me now. So maybe that's what 30 years of work bring you, is to say, okay, let's leave it. I just want to say one thing. That's enough.
Jim, what would you say to that?
I didn't totally hear all of the question, but I think I got the gist of it from Hélène's answer. I think that when an interesting thing happens when I finish a shoot, I have a relationship with that building now, and I'm not talking a sort of Louis Theroux weird documentary about the man who wants to marry a train station, but I have some sort of relationship built up with that building, so I become a little bit protective about it, even if it's a building that I didn't especially love, and I become a little bit protective over comments about it and things like that. Not about my images, but about the architecture, which sort of speaks to the fact that these buildings get ingrained in you, because when you're photographing a space, even if you're just there for a day, you're looking at it in a much more intimate way than you do if you're passing through it or if you're visiting an exhibition. You're looking at it in an incredibly in-depth way. So I think when I come out of a shoot, I always have a different feeling about the building when I came in. because I just know it so much better, and it's become ingrained in me a little bit. Was that relevant to the question?
Yeah, that was very relevant.
Okay.
Harrison, your music videos have kind of changed through the years, but I think even looking back at some of your older ones, they still have a real sense of like space and place. So maybe you want to also talk a little bit about that.
I'm not as been in this as long as Hélène and Jim. So for me, I guess I'm still in the early stages where after doing each of these shoots, it's kind of just, it opens my eye up to spaces everywhere. So I'm kind of more inspired daily, and I'm kind of on the hunt all the time. I feel like after each shoot, it makes me more hungry. Like every place I go, every space I'm in, I'm kind of like looking at it as okay, I wonder how that would look on camera. I wonder how this would look on camera. I wonder, it's just, yeah. So I know it's a bit of a weird answer, but I think my relationship with Walmer is similar to Jim. You just have a kind of new love for it once you've left, and you do get defensive, very defensive. But really what I feel is when you've come out of these things, you just realize how other things and other shapes and how it can all be used and be viewed in a more beautiful way. So I could be somewhere trashy after being in Walmer Yard, and I can kind of start to see the beauty in it a bit more, because I remember how we shot in that circle when we were in Walmer. I'm like I say, I'm still early, so it's kind of just opens my mind up to other places and makes me want to explore other interesting spaces in the world. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So I think that was a really great answer.
Yeah,
so there's also a question come in, I think more specifically for Jim, but from Arnold Mortimer, who asks, in your film, you shot 2 images together. How do you decide to do it that way? And was it a particular response to the building?
So the film wasn't really an intrinsic part of the original brief. The brief was predominantly for photos. So the film allowed a bit more not freedom, but allowed a bit more experimentation. I hadn't done the overlaying of frames on top of each other before. So that was kind of a new thing. And so what that sort of freedom allowed was just to play. So in the editing software, I use Final Cut myself, but I'm just playing with layering stuff on top of each other. And a part of it, to be completely honest, a part of it came out of desperation. Although I know that there is no practical way for me to demonstrate to the viewer of that film what it's like to be in that space, I still want to try and do that. And I know it's an impossible task, but that's what I'm aiming for, or some degree of that. So the desperate act is just to start throwing things at things and just seeing if anything sticks in your head. With the film, I had the time to play with things and take it away and put it back. But the bigger part of the layering, or the putting images on top of each other, is really actually quite literal. The building is an incredibly layered building, and it, like Hélène was saying, it's not a building that you mentally sit in because you notice other things and there's things going on. So it really was to sort of build up the layer of the senses that you're experiencing when you're there. And I mean, hopefully it serves as a kind of trailer, that people will use to choose to visit the building and experience it themselves. But in the meantime, yeah, that sort of layering effect in the video was intended to kind of convey some of that sense that there's more than one thing going on.
I mean, it's interesting because Peter did a talk really recently where he spoke about the layering in Walmer Yard. So it kind of, that now hearing you talk about the layering in your video brings that back to me.
Always on brand.
Yeah. Harrison, we've had a question come in for you from someone called Kelly Washington. And they ask, how did you fall into the kind of love of architecture, furniture and space when you're from a fairly different kind of side of things?
Well, music is kind of my main thing, but I started off drawing when I was younger, and then that led me to graphics. So I did a graphic design course when I was in university. So I've always been interested in shape and things like that. And I just feel like architecture is one of the like highest and most difficult forms of design that there is. So I'm always really interested in it. I'm kind of sad I didn't go down that route, but I just love music too much, so I'm kind of stuck here now. But it's great because I know you guys invite me to stuff like this, so I'm still part of this somehow, some way. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, for me, it's one of the most interesting and important things. You know, graphic design is like a big love of mine as well. But architecture, you can live inside these things you're designing. So for me, it's just kind of special for those reasons. But yeah, that's how I kind of got interested in it, really.
Yeah, it's great. I think like for me, it's really interesting that you have such a broad range that you're kind of drawing on in your ideas and what you're bringing to it. There's another question for Hélène from Ines Binnenbaum, and she says she's desperately trying to search for some of your photography books. Are they going to be republished again, or can people find them somewhere?
There's going to be a new book coming, the monograph of they say it's sold out. I don't believe it's sold out. They hide some books somewhere. So hopefully, yes, they will print it once again, but I haven't anything on the, on the pipeline right now to say they're going to publish. I've done an exhibition in China and I have a beautiful catalog, but it's in China, so it's very hard to bring it here. Hopefully, yes.
Yeah. And you can get Hélène's photographs in the latest Walmer Yard book, so that's one place to see them. And now I've just got one final question before we kind of wrap it up for the day. I'd like to hear kind of what you all think about Instagram. So Instagram's increasingly kind of becoming our way of experiencing buildings which we don't get to visit. I run tours regularly at Walmer Yard, and people who come here, it feels like they're just here to get that one Instagram shot, and they're not really kind of paying attention to what's going on or really looking at the rest of the building. So I want to know kind of what are your thoughts on how Instagram is influencing how we experience architecture? Jim, do you want to go first?
All right. This is a prickly subject, isn't it, amongst photographers? So let's get into it. I love it. I love Instagram. I think it's brilliant. I think it's fantastic to see so much people out there taking pictures. I think I read the transcription of Palasma's talk with Hélène, and I read that Hélène talking about how we need a new word, which I agree with, that separates photography and snapshots. We don't need to get too much into that, but I think it'd be nice if we can separate that terminology. But I love it. I don't think there's any problem with lots of people taking lots of photographs and experiencing things through photographs. I think there's a little bit of a danger in people like me, who I'm 38, people sort of middle-aged, is that middle-aged? Middle-aged people, nearly middle-aged people, looking at people who are, sort of 16, 17 and saying, well, they're not experiencing the space properly because they're just taking pictures of it. They're just looking for an Instagram picture of it. I think there's a danger in actually assuming that everybody experiences in the same way. And maybe that is their experience of the space. And maybe that is their fullest experience of the space. And maybe that should actually be celebrated, because in essence, taking a photograph, even if it is just a snapshot, is self-expression. And I think in all instances that should be celebrated. So I'm all for Instagram, and well, you know how I feel about it. Not necessarily Instagram, just people should take more pictures. Love it. And also, we live in this incredibly, I can really get onto this. Sorry. We live in this visually literate world, and there are problems with that, with architecture, in the fact that we are a little bit too visually orientated with the way we design buildings. But we do live in an incredibly visually literate world. TV's never been more beautiful than it is now. Films have never been more beautifully shot. I'm not saying the most beautifully shot film ever was made this year, but in general, across the whole canon of TV and films, it's so beautifully shot. We live in this, people are growing up in this incredibly visually literate world. So if they can bring a little bit of that on their phone, with a shot of the roof light in Walmer Yard, then I'm all for it. Love it. Agree.
Hélène, you definitely have thoughts on this. I've heard you speak about it before.
It's an endless question. I mean, I do have problem with the idea of getting with any camera in the building if you are there to visit, because you will think about how I'm going to put these two things together to send to my friends and not having the complex experience. And you're not going to sit and just dream. You want to immediately share. But it's true, two things, that you have a visual culture now that is much higher. You see kids that can make beautiful image and they never done it before. So the visual culture is growing. And for the photographer, for me, it's a liberation, because I remember early time, it was always like the architect was so worried about the first images and the first time. Now forget about it. You haven't even started your building, that there are pictures everywhere. So the picture are out and the photographer can do his work, which is different. So there's a form of liberation of, say, the image that the photographer does has his own life. It's not about showing the aspect of outside view of the building. It is a work. So there's a form of liberation for, in general, social media and images and Instagram. But I'm thinking about the time and the experience of being in front of something and not doing a photograph, what to do not to miss that, because it is precious.
Yeah. And Harrison, what are your thoughts? You're a slightly younger generation than us. Maybe you've got different thoughts on Instagram.
I mean, I think Hélène and Jim, I agree with them. It's really a double-edged sword, you know, really, really is a double-edged sword. I think if I could draw a parallel from music and live music and architecture, if I do a show, people will be there the same as when they come and visit a gallery or visit a building, and they'll be there with their phones, kind of missing the moment. So there's a kind of a sad part of it there where, you know, people are kind of documenting for later and not really being present. But at the same time, there's benefits, because, you know, people do want to have those memories. And then also for someone like myself, independent artist, or if it was an independent gallery or whatnot, once that stuff goes online and gets shared, it's a very good way to kind of spread your work, if that's what you'd like. And for me, that helps. So it really is a double-edged sword in terms of that. I think it can be a good tool, but you know, like Jim and Helen said, this is a debate that could go on for a few hours. But to wrap it, I'd say double-edged sword. I love it. I think it's a really good tool if used correctly, and it would be even better if Facebook would stop adjusting the algorithm and just let us have it as a tool and not our entire life. Then it'd be great, because not all of us can. I feel like I can try and control it as a tool and not make it my whole life, but not all of us can, man, because they design it to make it that strong for us. But I like it. I'm on it. You know.
Thanks. I think that's a great note to end on, but I'd love to just say thanks to all of you for being a part of it. I'm going to ask Luke to come back into the room, the space in a minute. And I don't know whether he has any questions he just wants to add and get one in there, but
yeah, well, I think I sort of looked at the clock and was like, wow, we've gone over an hour. It felt like 10 minutes. It was a great conversation, so thanks everyone for your contributions to that. Just on the Instagram one, I'd like to add, if you are into Instagram, we're at Zoomed In Festival, so yeah, it's a good one to check out. Please do drop us a follow. We've been growing, we're getting closer and closer to 1,000, so please do follow. Yeah, I guess one little question I had, just sneaking a quick one, is to H. You said kind of, maybe you thought about early in your life going down the architecture path. Do you think if you were doing that, you'd be doing kind of work that's as fun and as creative as you are now, or you just be, you know, stuck on Revit all day?
Hold on, sorry, explain that one more time.
So I'm saying, so you have this kind of relationship with architecture through your work, kind of, you know, as an independent artist, do you think be able to have such an exciting and experimental relationship with architecture if you were formally working as an architect?
Ah, I see. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, potentially not. No, I don't know, because I'll be honest, I don't have I have a working relationship with music, but I'm not trained how to do music. I can't play any instruments. I play piano, kind of self-taught. So, and that's the reason I love music, because I've got a freedom there And then I guess it's kind of the same for my interest in architecture and art. It's almost like the slight bit of ignorance can keep you kind of, you know, instead of analyzing everything, you can kind of just jump in and enjoy it and research and whatnot. Not saying that you know, I'm always trying to learn more and more and more, but because I don't have too much formal background in anything I'm working in, it's all just exciting. So potentially, yeah, but you know, maybe one day I will really jump straight into the architecture.
I saw Jim nodding a lot during that response.
It was about the sort of ignorance or naivety, you know, just not knowing everything about a subject. I think is actually a really liberating, important part of any process. Approaching something with a degree of is naive. I don't know if naivety is the right word. I don't quite have the vocabulary, but I think that's a really important thing in creativity. But and also I was nodding at the fact because I used to be an architect, or didn't used to be an architect. If the ARB are watching, I was an architectural technologist, and I was doing a lot of door schedules and window schedules and not particularly exciting experimental work, to be honest.
And just one more little final one. So we had a lot of gear questions about cameras, just all in the comments today and all through a week. Just to mix it up a bit of a music one. H, what synths are you using?
Right now, a really lovely friend has given me a Prophet.
Nice.
Which is a really, really great synth. I'm using that. I'm using my computer, and I'm using a Yamaha DX7. That's it. They're all really, really nice synths. But I just like using the computer mainly. But yeah, those are the synths I've got in isolation. I'm very lucky.
Oh, I think this festival is more than anything is proof that, you know, you have everything you need on your laptop. You know, the whole world's out there if you want to kind of give it a go. But anyway, thank you everyone for joining us. We had, you know, the YouTube audience is growing throughout. We had loads of comments. We had our first trolls of the festival as well. So I think we can say we made it now. And yeah, thanks all for tuning in. So just to finish, I want to direct you to our website, zoomedinfestival.com, where we have our program for the rest of the week. And let me share the screen. I can show you that. So we have our program on the front page. So we're back at 4 p.m. I'll be in conversation with director Emil Raphael, showing some of his work with Frank Gehry and with the Molman House as well. So that's going to be fantastic. Then Laura will be back at 7 p.m. for a really eclectic talk on No Touching Please, about experiencing architecture in different ways. So please do tune in for that. It's been great to see so many people back. So I know yesterday we had so much great, I think we were online for about 7 or 8 hours. It's a bit of a marathon, but we loved every second of it. So thanks for that. And then also, I've been going on about this all week and it's been such a fantastic response to this. Another objective of the festival is we are raising money for charity. So we're supporting the Trussell Trust, which supports food banks around the UK. And it's more important now than ever to support their works. And in aid of that, we're doing a affordable print sale. So this is a chance to get some of your favorite architectural photographers' images in print for outrageously cheap prices. You know, Jim and a few others have contributed. And Laura, as our curator for the day, do you want to maybe pick out a few of the ones that stood out to you?
Oh, there's so many in there. They're all so good. But I think a couple of my favorites. I really love pie and mash shops of London. I'm a northern girl and I love a good pie and some mashed potato.
That's Tim Crocker's pieces over here.
Tim Crocker's image there. I just think these are really special spaces that are kind of being lost in London. And I love that he's captured that one. And then my other favorite is right down the bottom by Luca Piperotti, his Beyond the Gate image. I just think he's taken these we listened to him talk about them a bit last night, and he's taken them during kind of isolation at night in the evenings. And I think they really capture like what it's like now. You know, they've always got like this kind of single person in a mask. And it's that kind of like, they've been let out during the dark hours of like that's when they can go and walk the streets or, you know, go out without being in close confines with people. And they just seem quite dark, but also, you know, just quite really interesting images for me.
Great. And yeah, so I've been going on about this all week. We had a fantastic response from the artists taking part throughout the programs. We've added loads more prints. We're almost at 50 in the affordable sale, and we've added a few in the limited print sale as well for kind of a more premium buyers out there. So we've got some really nice ones. Do you have photographers, Helen or Jim? Are there any ones kind of that you're seeing that stand out to you on my screen here?
Many.
It's a great selection, Luke. I'm not going to get in the embarrassing position that Laura was just in by not mentioning various friends who are in there, because she didn't mention either of my photographs.
Yeah,
so I'm just not going to enter this discussion. Just go on there. Everyone should go on there. There's a lot of great pictures on there and a lot of amazing photographers as well.
Helen, is there one that, with me scrolling through here, that stands out to you that you've noticed?
I mean, at the moment I'm looking at them very, very small. So, but of course I love it. I love the one that is called Lakeshore Drive by Jim. It's very nice. And then everything which has a bit of landscape, of course, I melt into it always. But scroll down, let's say, yeah, I mean, there's lots of beautiful Dennis Gilbert with Battersea Detail 1. That looks absolutely wonderful. And then the oh, it's out. I really also like talking about people and old people, but the one which is Anthony Coleman. What is it? I can't even read, it's too small.
Up or down, or?
With the back, Anthony, 2006, with the people sitting on the edge of the road. I think we're getting all very sensitive, you know, very kind of tuned to seeing few people, empty space, and we all feel that this is what we're going through now. So yeah, and I just need to put my head into it, and I will send you something, of course. It'll be lovely.
Fantastic. Yeah, we love that. Thank you. So yeah, and also, of course, you know, a lot of these photographers have already spoken this week, but on the archives. So at zoomedinfestival.com, everything's there. At Zoomed In Festival on Instagram, at Zoomed In Fest on Twitter. Thank you everyone for taking part, and we will see you again at 4 p.m. today. Thank you.
Thank you to you. Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much.